Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Developer Interviews here at Without Parole. This week we have Koriel, Kruer, and John Torkington from White Lotus Interactive, developers of XING, The Land Beyond. God, I did pronounce XING correctly, didn't I?
It's XING, just XING, XING.
It's been
yeah.
it's been a topic of conversation.
It's probably the first question we get at all during anything. It's like, how do you pronounce this? We say XING. So.
Good. Well, I understand the reason for the questioning. Obviously, it's a game about death. It's a game about exploring the land beyond, and so crossing does seem to be a reasonable interpretation of the title.
Yeah, it's a kind of a pun, I suppose. It's a little bit of a double meaning, and we totally get that. Yeah, crossing into the land beyond works.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really very, very curious just how the development of XING came together. Who is White Lotus? It can't be just you two, even though you two have been the face of it for a little bit here.
So at the moment, it's just us two. When we were developing XING, we did have another person, James, who's in the credits and whatnot, and he just couldn't be here today.
So the entire team, for the original PC version, was 3 people.
3 people.
That's insane. It's such a beautiful game. I don't understand that. It's not something that you normally would associate with a team of 3 people. We talk to small development teams all the time of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and I've never played a game that looks as beautiful as this.
Well, I mean, you could equate it to we've got 3 people and 5 years is kind of like the same thing as having
5 long years.
But no, seriously, we wanted to keep the team small. We really enjoyed having that more intimate, more back and forth, very democratic. We're very a large that kind of approach to working, and so in that way, that was a benefit to us. But yes, it takes a long time. When you don't have that much manpower, you just spend a lot of time on things.
Well, I mean, speaking of this very long period of time, we were pretty vocal on our channel here about how nervous we were because we had seen what seemed like a nearly finished product. You guys were showing it off to the PlayStation Underground official YouTube channel, and we were watching you guys play it. We're watching them play it, and it's like, here it is. It's a complete product. And then just radio silence for what seemed like a really long time, like long enough to make everybody nervous. Can you give us a little insight to what happened during that time?
Yeah, definitely. Basically, it was just going through a lot of QA, like just a lot of Sony QA, and there are a lot more checks for VR games, so that added like an extra probably like 2 or 3 months of back and forth, just like making sure that everything was like in ship shape. So yep.
To add on to that, this is our first title. It's first PS4 title, first PSVR title. There's a lot of steps that are just one could call them red tape, but it's all there for a reason. Stuff to make sure that you get things, you cross your T's, dot your I's. You gotta, you didn't send in that form correctly. You need to go back and resubmit this. Oh, that's another re-download, blah, blah, blah. Oh, you didn't read that one document in that one section to do, that kind of stuff.
And John handled all of that. I didn't really handle that. So that... He was a trooper, and
which I hope somewhat answers the radio silence question. We just didn't have anything to report. There was nothing interesting. It was just, it's going through this format. Again, it's going through this one setup. I remember talking with the Cyan devs about Abduction, and they had the same issue. They had going through format QA, blah blah blah. It's like, okay, so.
Yep.
Well, I'm very happy to see that the end result for XING, The Land Beyond, was much better than the end result for Abduction on PSVR.
They had a lot of trouble with getting the game to run on PSVR. If I recall, the PS4 Pro was pretty new at that time. I don't know if the game has support for PS4 Pro, but we found the fact that there was... when we started doing PSVR, there was no Pro. But once we got really serious about getting it done, the Pro was around, and we realized that people with PSVRs, a lot of them do have a Pro, and we wanted to make that be a core feature to have it be look really good on the Pro, and then it made me not worry as much about the PSVR. Turns out that the base PS4. Turns out that I did all my testing on the base PS4 anyways, because it's like the little one, and so through all that, I just spent so much time staring at it at the low quality settings that I just wanted to make it better and better, and so. Just a lot of time, and eventually it'll work. It'll look okay.
John's a perfectionist.
No. Just ship it.
It's good.
Well, it shows. The final product is fantastic, and yeah, I mean, I think it's funny that you guys brought up Abduction, and you obviously you were in contact with Cyan Worlds, but this. These two games, they feel like they have a lot in common. They feel like they're set in like the same kind of fantastic world, both puzzle-driven games. So it was another reason we were a little bit nervous. But we do live in like it's kind of a strange time. We've talked about this with other developers about how I think gamers more than ever like demand that developers talk to them constantly. So, I mean, were you guys getting hit up left and right? I know I DM'd you a few times during this, during the process. I can only assume you're getting hit up from all angles, though.
Yeah, there are definitely. I'm sad to say there are definitely like messages that I just haven't gotten back to, like for weeks or months, and it's just there's two of us, and. Sometimes it's like, well, something gets lost, or we don't have like a PR team or anyone that sits there and like answers all the media stuff. It's just us. So yeah.
It's totally understandable, but I don't think anybody had any idea really how small the team behind this game was. It's easy to say, hey, this is who we are, but it gets lost very quickly, especially when you see the gameplay videos and you're like, oh, this is like a big budget, this is like a big deal game. In fact, it was something, even in my review, I said, this is a game we needed when we first talked about PlayStation VR. This is a game that, like a full-fledged adventure, like upwards of 10 plus hours, just something you can really sink your teeth into. 2 years ago, this is something we were like, we need this on our platform. And I'm so glad that here we are after all this time, and it's still a game that we very much needed.
I mean, I'm glad that we were able to ship it. It would have been great to have been able to ship it in 2017. I mean, if you look back at our early Kickstarter, it said 2013. So that was before
we thought
the
we could
PSVR
make
was
this
out.
with 3 people in like 9 months, and our scope was just completely off.
I think being naive has its advantages, at least in terms of just wanting to make something amazing. And I think our stubbornness made it so we actually followed through. It just took us a very long time.
Yep.
Now, Koriel, you mentioned that John was the one handling all the paperwork, all the red tape, and everything. Is this something that you both do full time though? Are you White Lotus full-time employees, or do you have other jobs?
Well, I mean, I guess for the 5 years that we were like really hard into development, that was full time. Sometimes like 60, 70, 80 hour weeks. But like, I guess since we launched a PC, I personally haven't been working on it full time. No way. So, yeah.
I guess my answer is I've been working on it full time in the sense that I am officially, let's see, what's the right way to put this without revealing anything great. I've been working on XING, pushing it on PS4. I've been working for White Lotus full time, but I haven't necessarily been spending all my waking hours on pushing PS4.
I want to find a crafty way of asking you what you've actually been working on.
That's classified.
Classified.
Nothing to announce at this time.
But I'm sure there'll be a Without Parole exclusive very shortly where you can reveal all.
Wishful thinking about that very shortly remark.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we like to take our time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, apparently you guys probably learned a thing or two about release dates then.
Yes.
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 Just one or two things, probably.
And not announcing your game like 5 years before you launch it. Just don't do it. Just
see, I just. Yeah, that's that.
Yep.
I don't want to harp on like forever about this, the lengthy development process, but I do have to. I do want to ask: was there ever a point where you're like, this just isn't going to happen? Like this just isn't coming to PlayStation VR or PS4?
I mean, yeah. I mean, definitely.
Really? I had no doubt.
well, I guess it was more about the delay that was disheartening all the time. We really did intend to release on PC VR and PlayStation VR at the same time. In hindsight, I'm very glad we didn't. It would have been a nightmare to try to get together, which is ultimately why we waited. And I think when we did launch in PC VR in September 2017, we thought that it was going to be a 6-month process to get PlayStation together, because I had a build running on a PlayStation VR. We had showed it at demos. We were at PSX for 2 years, and this is working. It just takes time, man. Admittedly, now that I've done it before, that process should be way shorter. But the first time going through without anyone knowing what they're doing, it just yeah.
Man. So which one of you guys is responsible for my constant migraine? Because I drop into XING and I'm just like, these puzzles are killing me. Like literally just like slowly, slow death. Who's responsible for all these?
It depends on the puzzle. Is the real answer.
All three of us made different puzzles in the game.
Yeah,
So,
I would
I
say
think John probably made the majority of puzzles. I would say he made the I don't think we all made 30% of puzzles specifically.
I think I usually take the credit for making the ones that people hate. So.
Yeah, that's true. Mine are the really easy, simple ones. Like, oh, you find the drum and okay, cool, you hit it, done.
Well,
it moves the pillars.
But, I mean, those puzzles have a real like art to them, I guess. In the
mine
fact
are all
that
the
it's
intro.
You really stressed. I remember Corey being the one who really stressed the idea of having you need to really ease people into these puzzles. You need to have here's the most obvious way of doing this, just so people are familiar with how to interact with the mechanics that we've created. So she stressed that and crafted those puzzles, which are arguably the most important. So.
My favorite one is when you fall into the pit and then you just step on a circle and it raises you up. I was like, I can handle this one.
That is definitely Corey.
That was me. I was like, it would be really cool if there was a pit and it's thematically, in the story, the character is talking about falling down, and that's how I was like, yep, because I was very in tune with the stories and the environments. So.
Well, that's man. I gotta say, the first two stages of the first two worlds, I was reading, picking up every single tablet. I'm very much a collectathon kind of guy. I want to make sure every single one of those circles is lit up before I move on to the next world. Admittedly, I still haven't found. I mean, I'm missing about a third of all the runes, so I need to go back and do basically the entire game all over again. But I wasn't really connecting with the story for the first two worlds, and then there was the third world. I don't want to really start spoiling anything for people who haven't played it yet. But man, suddenly it all hit home, and I felt it. I had to stop a few times and just be like, I felt for this girl, and I was like, oh, it's suddenly. I'm wondering if there are people because it related to me on a personal level for various reasons, and I'm wondering does World 1 resonate with certain people more than it resonated with me? Does World 2, this kind of stuff? And I'm going to say it has to. I don't think there's a question here. I think I'm just rambling. But have you gotten any feedback about the story?
We have. There've actually been a lot of really nice messages that we've received from people over the last year or so since PC release, where people have said, this story, it helped me so much. I was going through such a tough time. I just lost a loved one, or I just did this, or a lot of people messaged us after playing the game and feeling something, and the really amazing thing was having those messages and having people at the end say this helped me deal with it. Like, it made me feel better, you know, like I am more at peace with all of this stuff. And those were like, you know, those are the things that we like had worked all those years for, you know. That was the moment where we were just, you know, that was great. So
I want to give a small shout out. You were talking about level 3 to our friend Denise, who is for all of our voice actors in our game were professionals that we found and through various means, and we really like them. We've got a lot of great comments that say that they like the voice actors, which I'm also giving props to Corey, because she's the one who really pushed to do voice acting, and ultimately I think it was a good decision. But for the 3rd level, it was actually our friend Denise who
she had never done any voice acting before.
I remember when we were casting for it, we were trying to find like a little girl, and which you don't really find. A little girl voice actor have been a little weird. So, you know, we're asking all these you know, young women to be like, oh, do your little girl voice.
We did a lot of tests.
And it just doesn't work, because you start to get that uncanny valley sort of weird.
Well, a lot of them were just very like cartoony, because that's what a lot of like children voices from adults are supposed to be for. They're supposed to be for cartoons.
And
so.
I remember when Corey just said, hey, listen to this one, and this sent it to me. I'm like, I know who that is.
But it sounded perfect. Her voice really fit.
It's funny how those kind of things happen.
Yeah.
Did the writing for these tablets and these scrolls and everything, did it come from your personal lives? If that's not too personal of a question to ask.
It didn't actually. They were. My big thing for this game was kind of having diversity in the characters, diversity in the stories, and just stories in general are things that I'm passionate about. I love, you know, books, movies, TV shows, all that kind of stuff, where I just get to soak them in. And so most of the stories were actually just, I guess, inspired by those things versus like my own personal life. They weren't really inspired by like personal life stuff. But I'm one of those people who admittedly will like cry like tears of joy or tears of like sadness at like most shows or movies. So I really like connect with characters. Like I'll put myself in their position, or if a character has a brother, then I think about that character as my brother. And then if it's I'm watching a movie and that brother dies, like I'm just bawling because I feel like my brother just died. And so that was definitely something that I tried to bring to the story, to have like some sense of connection with characters.
Well, it totally worked for me, and I'm one of those people that like doesn't seem to ever connect when I'm supposed to. You know, like if you can tell when somebody's trying too hard to create that connection with the gamer or the viewer, and then I'm suddenly watching an episode of iCarly and I break down because of a joke hit me the wrong way. You know. So the fact that it resonated with me, I felt like was a pretty big deal, to be honest. We have some questions from our community, if you guys don't mind sticking around here. Texatron asks, are there plans to patch the way the move controls work? Obviously, I noticed in your AMA, you said it's kind of like I said it was like a point and click mechanic, but
that's kind of what we tried to model it after. So. Yeah. Just taking a little bit on the backstory before I answer your question directly. The Move controllers were a really interesting thing for us to start developing for. I remember when we first got the Project Morpheus dev kit and realizing that it was, these Move controllers that's what you get. Because the DualShock, that's pretty straightforward. Right. People had already, even that early on, had started making, okay, here's kind of how you make a first-person locomotion. Like, just make it like it is a first-person shooter without the turning. Then the click turning stuff, and that's all iterative. But the Move controllers really presented a problem. It's like, how do you move with this? You know, there's no analog, there's not even a D-pad, it's just this weird thing. So, funny enough, it seems like we developed our idea of, at least for moving, pressing the move button and pointing, and then you move forward. Well, turns out Skyrim did that, and so everyone just calls it Skyrim movement. But we did it too. We did it before them, but we didn't ship before them. But I like to think someone at Bethesda found our demo at PSX or something, and then they're like, oh, that's good. Yeah. But the turning was always kind of a question, because you couldn't realistically hold down the button and smoothly turn around and get really weird. So it spent a lot of time. Eventually, I came up with the idea of, well, it's an adventure game. Why not make it like a point and shoot? So it works, and I like it, and Corey likes it. A lot of people like it. It is hard. It is admittedly hard to learn because it is unlike using a first-person controls on the DualShock. Everyone knows how to do that. It's very different. And it turns out that Skyrim, I guess, takes the approach of using buttons to turn. So it was also pointed out by a couple other people that we aren't using every button on our Move controller because there's only like 2 controls, grab and throw. So yeah, I think it is in the works here. Once I get off of dealing with all the launch issues and whatnot, I'll look into doing a little update, and potentially taking a look at the turning mechanic in the game. So
I would also just like to point out that the way we kind of came up with the move system that we have,
yes.
Was we were thinking about funny enough, we were thinking about like the reins of a horse, and like when you pull, I'm like a horseback rider, so but like when you point the horse like this way, you know, and then the horse will go this way, you move the reins this way, and then the horse goes that way, and that was just like, oh yeah, that's like this, and so we ended up calling it internally reins. So
you're piloting a miniature horse.
An invisible horse.
Invisible tiny ghost horse.
I do feel like I kind of glossed over that in my review. I said, just letting people know that the option for move controls were there. But I do know that a lot of people, they're like, oh, smooth turning or nothing. And so I just kind of, I wanted to...
Yeah, we learned that one the hard way when we did PSVR, or sorry, not PSVR, but PCVR. We did not have smooth turning as an option when we first launched. I think it was their first patch was to add in because people want it, and it's for me, like I'm a little susceptible to motion sickness, so I
am susceptible to motion sickness, so I cannot do
smooth turning. Not good, but you know what? That's the best thing about VR, which I really like that it's doing, especially to the PlayStation community, is it's introducing a lot of options for people. I mean, I remember you play a PlayStation 2 game, you go into the options menu, there's like 2 things maybe, there's like subtitles on, and but you're seeing so many more, especially for these PlayStation VR games. I know I opened up Resident Evil 7, and there's this massive menu of just every different possible combination. That's really, really, I mean, I'm a little bit more of a PC gamer than a PlayStation gamer, so I like to see that. I like seeing that go from going from there. So yeah, options are great.
Nice. Now you got me on a different path entirely. Even though you're more of a PC gamer, do you guys actually play a lot of other PSVR games?
So, well, I'll immediately answer. I haven't been playing much games at all recently. is a
little busy?
But it turns out what's funny is a lot of the VR games we play are games that, or at least for me, that are games that are on PC VR as well. So to me, I've got all the VR everything. So it's kind of like which headset is available and plugged in at the time that I want to play something. Like Beat Saber is a good example. It's like the experience is more or less the same on all 3, at least in my eyes. So I know Corey plays a lot of Beat Saber herself.
I play a lot of Beat Saber.
Are you like expert plus level?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corey's. I'm like completely novice.
Yeah, no, that's where I'm at too. The downside to running a PlayStation VR channel is that you don't have time to stop and enjoy the game that you love. You have to like move on to whatever's next constantly. I
use it for exercise.
Excellent. Nice. Yeah. My favorite part is anytime you guys you give us a big update or something, it gives me an excuse to go back and play your game again.
Right.
So you keep updating your game and I'll keep playing it. Make that deal.
Got it.
The other question Texatron asked is, are you planning on 3D rudder support?
So we were contacted by the 3D rudder guys probably, I don't know, a month or 2 ago, and they've got an interesting thing. I need to get in contact with them a little bit more. We were naturally very focused on just shipping on PSVR, and so we kind of just let's not worry about that right now. But I am seeing more and more people being interested in the device. What's interesting is over the years, we've been doing VR stuff for a long time. We get a lot of different random companies just saying, oh, here's this next really great motion solving, blah, 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 just weird add-ons.
And you move your hands like this, and it's great.
And so it's
like,
really easy for us to dismiss them because I remember reaching out to some of them very early on, and it becomes vaporware very, very quickly. And so but it does look like the rudder is getting a lot of support. Sony's officially supporting it, which is really neat. So something that we might be looking into in the future.
Nice. Yeah, I've heard it's from other developers that it's super easy to develop for. It's easily integrated into games, and it wasn't something it wasn't even on my radar, honestly. I was like, I don't know. If I'm going to sit down on my couch, I'm going to use a DualShock 4. I don't really have a use for this. But the more I talk to different developers, the more it sounds like this is a great solution to dual wielding and full locomotion at the same time.
I am really interested in taking a look at it. So.
Yeah, same here. I can't wait for it to show up. Dylan Gladstone asks, the graphics button doesn't do anything in PlayStation VR mode. Any chance that you'll change that and allow us to customize how the Pro handles the graphics?
So that's pretty much a Sony thing. So the first version I sent to them had the full graphics menu in there. It had different settings there. And Sony was like, because they're very, very, and rightfully so, very, very strict on the frame rate that the PSVR runs on. So what they were worried, and I kind of get it, they couldn't, any new graphic settings I do in that setting there, they need to QA the entire game again. So they would literally need to play through all of it again and make sure that at every moment in every section of the game, it never drops below 60 FPS. So they did that once. Actually, I suppose they did that twice because they did it for base PS4, and then one for PS4 Pro. So
and we're very grateful that they did.
Yeah, so that's the short answer on why the graphics menu is just disabled on VR. It does work on non-VR and flat screen, whatever you want to call it. And there's two different options there. One for favors frame rate, and one is locked 30 FPS, but has like higher quality.
That only pops up on the Pro?
No, that's actually on both. I don't remember all the settings, but effectively they're both around, I think Pro is locked 60 FPS on the frame rate settings at like pretty much the highest graphic settings. And then if you go to the high quality at 30 FPS, it runs at 1440p. I don't remember. It runs at a high res. No, maybe it's 1600p. It's some higher res, and then it's locked at 30 because people have 4K TVs. They like it. It's cool. So.
Nice. Yeah, no, I mean, it looks stunning. I obviously I spent a good majority of my time with the PlayStation VR mode turned on, but every time I dropped into the flat screen mode, I couldn't believe how nice that looked. So congrats on making a stunningly beautiful game. And we didn't even talk about the soundtrack. I mean, where did this soundtrack come from? There's no way. Did one of you three compose the soundtrack as well?
Yeah, I wrote the soundtrack. There's a piano behind me. But yeah, it's funny you bring that up too, because when we initially started the project back in 2012, Corey and I were doing a level design assignment for our college. It was like
it was it was a class assignment.
Yeah, and I was studying to become a sound designer, and that even my study of being a sound designer really kind of was, I actually want to be a composer, but this is a more realistic job. And so when we were doing this level design thing, which I was just taking level design because I liked video games, and we just got really into it. We just started working on it really hard, and I was just using it as this platform. I thought, I'll write some music for this, and then I'll use this for my my reel. It will be my actual resume for my music. So I'm working on this project called XING, which is just going to be this little collection of environments made in, Unreal Development Kit. And it's actually going to be like, this is the music that I make. Great. Then we ran a Kickstarter, I guess. I don't know. There's, some things happened, and then I became a game developer. So
some things happened 4 years later, and.
But yeah, I wrote 90-ish% of the music in the game. My friend Gilbert wrote some of the other tracks. On my Bandcamp, there's a list of who did what, and all the music available for download.
Stunning. You guys are probably the most talented 3 people on the face of the planet. One more question from the community. Magic asks, can you compare development for the PlayStation VR to the development of PC VR? What was harder and what was easier, if anything?
I would say difficult to say because we did PC VR first. I think we focused on PC VR before anything else because probably our history. We started just as a flat screen game because there was no VR in 2012, and then the Oculus, the what do you call it, the DK1, right, came out. Kickstarter ran. We had it when we ran our Kickstarter. A bunch of people asked, "Hey, please, can you make this game for VR?" We're like, "Yeah, it'll be easy. Just plug it in. Unreal has support for that, right?"
We were using UDK at the time, not Unreal 4. So we ended up switching over like a year later.
You're right.
To support VR.
From there on, I think it was always like Oculus as a first-class citizen because we were working with the DK1, then the HD Dev Kit, then the DK2, etc. And once the Morpheus was announced, which I'm still a little disappointed they didn't name it the Morpheus, but
no, same here.
But it's so great. God of Dreams, it totally works. It's and it would have been thematic for our game too. It would have been great. Anyways, when that came out, it was kind of like, ooh, that's pretty neat. I mean, also to be fair, the PlayStation 4 wasn't out when we launched when we started. Wow. Development.
And sometime in between there, the Vive was also announced, and we were like, yeah, we'll support that too.
So,
why not?
So really, long story short here, what I'm trying to say is we started knowing full well we were going to make the PC version, like that's going to be our first-class citizen. And so had we instead started as a PlayStation 4 game and a PSVR game, I think development would have honestly been fairly similar. There have been some things that are easier, like having a fixed platform means that you know that it's going to work and here's why, or it's going to not work. And that is something that is very important. And it does change your development strategies. We wouldn't have had to make a lot of different graphics options stuff. We wouldn't have had to make support for different video card manufacturers, all that kind of jazz. But there's different challenges. There's technical challenges that are involved with the PS4. There's weird memory management stuff. There's weird graphics API stuff. It's a weird little black box. So you got to figure that out. So I don't know. I would say they're largely the same though. I mean they have pretty much the same input methods and it just works.
It's more accessible to develop for PC VR. I mean that's one of the major things. Like the only reason why we ended up starting to develop for PlayStation in the first place was because at one point I went to Indiecade and I was like, I had like a meeting somehow with a couple people from PlayStation or Sony, and I just showed them like a trailer for a game on a laptop, and they were like, yes, let's put this on the PlayStation. We're like, okay, great, and that started our relationship with Sony.
Yeah, and so, on that note, I actually just saw on Reddit today on RPSVR there was a developer that was seeking basically that interview, getting someone to from Sony to be like, hey, I like your game, let's put it on PSVR. And he says he's been looking for about a year now, emailing them and getting nothing and whatnot. And I actually think that someone suggested, talk to the XING devs about how they got on there. And so here's my answer. How do we get on there? That's what Corey said. We just went to Indiecade. Now, is it like that anymore? I don't know. But I will say that getting a person-to-person, actually talking to a rep from the company, that's the only way we've gotten anything done. I think there's so few times that we've actually sent an email to someone, like a cold email, and gotten a response. It's almost always been at a show or something like Indiecade or E3,
the Game Developers Conference,
GDC. Yeah. That's my advice there. His game looks really cool.
Go to events, meet people.
It looked neat. So.
I did see on Reddit, the Reddit AMA you guys did, you jokingly referred to the AMA as the extent of your marketing. I mean, I'm implying that it was jokingly said. I hope that's not really the case.
No, I mean there's some truth to the statement, but it was more of an emphasis of that it's very difficult to market a game. It's very difficult to market our game anyways, and it takes a lot of money to actually compete with the big boys. If you want to get out there, and you know, it's interesting. There really hasn't been for PSVR. I haven't seen too many titles other than say like Resident Evil that have been a full AAA blah blah blah, and even Resident Evil's a flat game that has a VR segment. So
most. I mean, we'll send emails out. We try, but most of the really large like media and press don't really care about PlayStation VR at this point. They just don't want to write about it. And even though we play, we have our game. It's new to PlayStation as well. It's flat. Like it's not big enough. It's not, and we haven't paid them money. It
is also actually probably what we just said. We haven't gone and physically talked to someone at IGN. I think, and that's even harder because when you go to these GDCs and whatnot, there's like these cliques. There's the cliques of the developers and there's the clique of all the press. And so the press stick together. They're like, oh yeah, they have a job to do, which is like go interview developers, but they want to stick together.
So like, I'm trying not to like pat myself on the back when I ask you this question, but like, but at this point, like, how much do you guys rely on, like, on YouTube channels and people that do like what we do and what Dave Station and Gamertag and everyone else is doing? How much do you rely on us to get the word out?
I mean, when we I mean, just as a fun fact, we shipped out over 100 keys for PlayStation to YouTubers and to anyone who reached out more or less if they had a channel that looked legitimate, large or small.
For PlayStation?
For PlayStation, yeah. You can look at our list. We have about 100 keys. Yeah, it's a lot. You look at that and you're like, oh, we didn't send that to me. No, we sent a lot of keys out because we just kept on answering emails. And if they had a channel that looked good, we would send them a key. And I think that we've gotten a massive response rate on those. I mean, a huge, I don't know what the exact number is, but a huge percentage of them have put out a review. And it's great. And or just a blurb or just something, have made a comment. So while we did that, Sony took a lot of our keys and shipped them to IGN, Forbes, or whatever, all these different huge old GameSpot, like all these big companies, and we haven't gotten anything from them. They have a 0% response rate from all those and a I don't know, 60-70% response rate for the other ones. Wow. So to answer your question, I think we're relying on them quite a bit because that's what we're getting our coverage on.
We rely on YouTubers quite a bit to spread the word too. And I think what's nice is a lot of people who, like, people who follow your channel, people who follow other channels, like they trust the channels that they follow maybe a little bit more. And so I think that builds like a nice relationship.
There's no simple way of saying this, or maybe there is only a simple way of saying this. Zing the Land Beyond is, I mean, it's going to, I cannot not see it ending up in our next top 20 list. I can't not see it ending up in the top 10 in our next top 20 list. This is, I think, a monumental game. I think this is a game that most people should be playing, whether they have a PlayStation VR headset or not. I'm absolutely in love with your game. It's one of the few games that I had almost nothing negative to say about. I'm absolutely addicted to it, and I just want to congratulate you for this long journey finally winding down to a close. And thank you for like celebrating here with this interview.
I really appreciate your kind words.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
But please stay in touch. We want to make sure, if you guys have any updates, if you're planning on anything in the future, please let us know because we always want to keep the community informed.
You got it.
Definitely. Will do.
Awesome. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
All right.
For sure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, so I guess that does it for another episode of Without Parole Developer Interviews. Thanks everybody for hanging out, and of course everyone who submitted a question over on the community page. And of course, thank you to Koriel and John for answering our questions and bringing your amazing game to PlayStation VR. We wish you the best of luck. Next Saturday, we'll be talking to the developers of Dick Wild, so make sure you head on over to our community page and ask your questions there. As always, I'm Brian Paul, and I love you all.